Hey, I'm Ryan Grimm, Washington Bureau Chief for the Huffington Post, reporting here for the Young Turks with Eric Byler. Yesterday we were talking a lot about the filibuster reform and the Neil Gorsuch confirmation, as well as the rise and probable demise of TrumpCare for the third time around in just a couple of weeks. We had a malfunction with the questions in the Facebook comments section yesterday, but we were able to collect a lot of them overnight, and we want to get to some of those now. Eric, what was the main thrust that we missed?
Well, as soon as you started talking about a deal with Mitch McConnell or anything that might involve Mitch McConnell, they said, we don't trust him, and if he's going to change the rules, he's going to screw everyone and make it so he can even pass legislation without the 60 votes.
Interesting question, and actually there's a lot that's still up in the air, but that's one we can answer now. So Mitch McConnell doesn't actually want to get rid of the filibuster for legislation. So under current law or current Senate procedure, Senate rules, you need 60 votes in order to break a filibuster. And if you don't have 60 votes, you can't get legislation through. And that's a thing that was extremely frustrating to Democrats in 2009 and 2010 when they had the majority. Now it's the thing that is kind of holding back some of the Trump or Tea Party stuff that might be able to get through the House but doesn't have the votes to get through 60 votes to get through the Senate, because the Republicans only control 52 votes there. Now, why wouldn't Mitch McConnell want that? Isn't Mitch McConnell an ardent conservative, an ardent Republican who wants to see the Republican agenda implemented? Yes and no. Mitch McConnell is also somebody who cares deeply about the Senate as an institution, but also he cares deeply about himself as Senate Majority Leader. As Senate Majority Leader, he has more power vis-a-vis Trump if he has to work with Democrats in order to get things done. If Republicans only need 50 votes plus Mike Pence to get things through the Senate, then Donald Trump, and kind of like in a top-down kind of way, can just sort of dictate an agenda. He can say, well, this is a Donald Trump, this is a normal Donald Trump. But Donald Trump at 35% approval rating or 30% approval rating has a lot less power than he does at, say, 45%. But let's assume we're talking about a Donald Trump who has an average amount of presidential power. What he can say is, these are the things I want done. Mitch, Ryan, go get them done. Paul Ryan doesn't have a whole lot of excuses, and so when he fails, he looks like an utter buffoon, as he did the week before, because he can't blame Democrats for holding him up. Mitch McConnell can say, well, Donald would love to do what you're telling me to do, but I have to do it on my own terms. I have to do it on my own way. The Senate is its own unique institution, and we have to work across the aisle with Democrats, so I'm going to have to find 8 Democrats to work with me. Mitch McConnell doesn't necessarily care about finding 8 Democrats to work with him. What he wants is to find 8 Democrats that he can defeat in 2018, and so that he can go out to these Republican states and say, look, this Democrat who represents you in the Senate is standing in the way of the Trump agenda, standing in the way of repealing Obamacare, etc. Get him out, and then we're going to give you what you really want. And that's the Mitch McConnell game. It's actually that's in many ways the Democratic Party game too. All political parties do this. They set the goal out here. They identify the obstacle as the other party. Say, eliminate this other party here, and then you will reach your goal. It often happens that the activists will go ahead and eliminate that goal or eliminate that obstacle, and then they move the goalposts a little bit, which is what has consistently happened to the Republicans.
And yesterday, Connie Perazis was saying the Dems do not have the spine to stand strong. They will wimp out and put Gorsuch through.
Well, Democrats have been given a spine by grassroots activists who have kind of humiliated them and pressured them into supporting a filibuster of Neil Gorsuch. So there are now more than 40 Democrats who say that they will not vote to end a filibuster, which means that the only way that Mitch McConnell can get Gorsuch through is by changing the rules, is by the nuclear option and eliminating the right to filibuster a Supreme Court nominee. Now he's not going to eliminate the right to filibuster legislation, so it will only affect Supreme Court nominations, but there's nothing that Democrats can do to stop that. as long as Mitch McConnell has the 50 votes plus Mike Pence to do it. And the way he seems to be setting it up is he's probably going to do it on a Friday. He'll change the rules, and then 5 minutes later, they will vote to confirm Neil Gorsuch. So he hopes that the headlines will read, Senate confirms Neil Gorsuch, rather than Senate goes nuclear, blows up, 100-year institution.
So you mean this Friday?
Right, correct. And then they go on recess. Right. So I expect that it'll all happen together, both votes at once on one after the other on Friday.
Okay, so tell us about the third death of TrumpCare.
Donald Trump declared that TrumpCare was coming back to life, that he'd been talking to Rand Paul on the golf course, that Paul Ryan had been working with the moderates and the Freedom Caucus, and they're going to bring it back together. And the genius way that they decided they were going to get TrumpCare over the finish line was by screwing people who have pre-existing conditions, because nothing makes politics better for you than telling 120 million people that it's going to be more difficult for them to afford health insurance. So they spent the early part of this week saying optimistically, we're going to get together. Last night, the moderates met with Mike Pence. They met with Scalise, the House vote counter. They emerged from that saying, we don't really actually have a deal. And the reason they don't have a deal is that it's going to be very difficult for a Republican in a district that went within 5 points of Hillary Clinton in this last election to say, sure, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cast a vote that says that anybody who has pre-existing conditions can no longer be insured, or if they can be insured, they're going to have to go to one of these bunk high-risk pools, or they're going to have to pay an extraordinary amount more for their health insurance. So TrumpCare, they said they were planning on getting something through the House before recess. Recess is fast approaching. They have no path to getting that done at this point. And the funny thing is, at this point, they're not even trying to get it through the Senate. They recognize that whatever they get through the House is going to fail in the Senate. And so the bar is pass anything, something, anything that Republicans can agree on, and get it over to the Senate. Let the Senate deal with it. And yet they still can't do that. Like, literally, they can't find a piece of paper that doesn't have any practical import, no real implications, because it won't go through the Senate, and they still can't agree with it. And I think it's a reflection of how dire they see their own electoral chances in 2018. Now, we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves. This is still a party that controls absolutely everything and could for the foreseeable future.
Quentin Hoffman is saying Joe Manchin should just run as a Republican since he's giving them everything they ask for in the first place. Is there any value to having him as a Democrat if you're a progressive?
Well, it depends on what you care about. So Joe Manchin, he voted against Wilbur Ross for Commerce Secretary, while some other Democrats voted to support him. He said Ross's ownership of a mine that killed West Virginia miners, as well as his his shutting down of some steel plants in West Virginia, were the reason that he opposed him. All Republicans supported Ross. Manchin is there on a lot of kind of party line Democratic votes. If you want to do Medicare for all, and let's say you need 60 votes, you're going to be dealing with people like Manchin to try to get to that 60. Let's say it's not till 2025 or so that Democrats really have a shot at something like that. But if they do, there aren't enough kind of blue states to get to 60 hardcore liberal or Democratic socialist senators. So you need a few who are kind of these populist conservatives or populists, just straight populists, like a John Tester in Montana, who are not always with you on everything, but help you get to that 60 votes that you're going to need for something like a Medicare for all. So if he becomes a Republican, you pretty much have no chance of getting him. You don't ever hear about Shelley Moore Capito. She's the other senator from West Virginia. She's a Republican. 50 years ago, she probably would have been a Democrat in that state. Because you don't ever hear from her, people don't hate her as much, but she votes against the things that progressives care about 100% of the time, whereas Manchin votes against it maybe 20% of the time. So do you have the luxury? The question is, do you have the luxury of losing that vote when you need it, in order to not have to be annoyed at his ass when he, is bucking you in crucial moments.
Okay, so Kate Cantanella has 2 suggestions for healthcare policy.
Yeah.
One is get rid of the fine.
Or the other option would be to primary him with somebody who can win. That's the other path. Now,
West Virginia is very conservative, though. Right. Okay, whatever. I already tried to pronounce it and mangled it.
Right.
She said, get rid of the fine for not having purchased health care and all these things that make you take a flu vaccine or wear a mask that doesn't work anyway.
So you'll be happy to hear that Trump has instructed the IRS not to require you to declare whether or not you had health insurance. So in some ways, the mandate has been chipped away at. It's the IRS is not making it clear what will happen if you don't have health insurance. You don't mention whether you do or not on your file on your tax returns, and then you randomly get audited. Now, because Republicans have gutted the IRS's funding, audits are down to something like 1%. So, and they tend to audit people of slightly higher net worth with more complicated tax returns. So, if you're just a regular person filing today, the chances of you getting audited are awfully slim. Now, if you do get audited and they find out that you didn't have health insurance and you didn't pay the fine, will they hit you up for the fine? Nobody really knows yet, because there is a case to be made that if you get stuck with that fine, that is an unequal treatment, since so many other people are not having to pay this fine. I don't know how that would fly in court. I don't think anybody here would want to find out. I do believe there's also kind of a socialist kind of defense of the idea that everybody ought to kick in. If you're not purchasing private insurance, then there's no socialist theory under which anybody should be forced to purchase private insurance, then you really ought to be kicking in, if you can afford it, to the government, so the government can then provide insurance to the rest of the population, which is sort of the goal of the Affordable Care Act. So I think there is kind of an ethical issue here in terms of the contribution, but it's kind of odious to try to force somebody to buy insurance from a private company.
Thomas Mosby has a true life story. He said his son had to pay this fine, but it wasn't all that much, and he was happy to because it helps others get health care.
Right. Yeah, so I sometimes think about parking tickets that way. It makes me feel a little bit better. Let's say I get a $30 parking ticket. I'm like, you know what? This is money that's going to Washington, D.C., and the chances are they're going to use most of it for things that I support. Not all of it, but most of it is going to go to schools, to roads, to teachers, to government, to city employees, to help this city run, and that's how I kind of make it a little bit less painful, paying that parking ticket that I don't think I deserve, but of course I did because I don't know how to read those signs. So yeah, now a word of caution: the fines are going up. The way that Democrats wrote the law, the fines on the front end were $50, $100, so, and to try to ease people into it. The fines are going up, though, depending on how much your income is. The fines can wind up being substantial. So people do need to be careful about that.
You know, I lost health insurance when I switched careers and left I didn't leave the Directors Guild, but I stopped paying COBRA. And so I didn't have health insurance during the end of my young invincible years. And then I didn't want to get this fine, so I got insurance. I got a checkup, and I found out that I was pre-diabetic, and if I didn't stop drinking soda all day, I could get diabetes. So I'm sort of glad that I did it too.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I'm sorry you've got that. I'm glad you found it out.
But no, I fixed it now. I changed my diet, and I don't have that
and you're
problem.
better off not drinking soda all day. So I don't feel bad for that part. Yes, exactly. Like if you treat people's health care on the front end before they get sick, not only do you save money, but it's not about money. It's about living a better life, and you live a better life without diabetes than you do with. So if you can, on the front end, learn that and change your lifestyle so that you don't wind up with it, then everybody benefits.
Christina Domingo Taylor says, what are your thoughts about Bannon being kicked off of National Security Council?
Well, it looks like Bannon's right-hand man is the guy who was tagged as one of the sources for Devin Nunes getting this classified information, which he then briefed the president on, which is bizarre. Why would you brief the president on something you just learned from the president's team, whatever, and then went public with it? And the entire reason that you don't want a political hack on the National Security Council is for things like this. So Bannon and his cronies that were on the NSC went and coordinated, it appears, with Nunes in order to kind of get him information that they thought would be advantageous to them politically in the moment, even though it appeared to have been deceptively rolled out. It was a release of classified information, which is the thing that they spent a year protesting. That's why you don't have hacks like that, political hacks on that council. So I would, if I had to speculate, that's why he got kicked off. The rest of the national security officials said, we can't, this is why you weren't supposed to be here in the first place, because the second that you get access to any classified information winds up in the hands of this buffoon over in the House, and now the House Intelligence Committee is entirely discredited.
Does that mean that maybe McMaster put his foot down, or
something like that? Yeah. It sounds like those folks used this moment as leverage to get him off. That's what appears to have happened.
Right. It's always that fight between the people who have integrity and they use national security for national security versus the people who are more politically minded, and then who has the leverage at what given time.
Right. And now the people who have integrity, they too have blood all over their hands in a lot of the operations that they've run around the world, but they're not partisan political actors, and so they hate the partisan political actors, and they want them out. They don't. They don't want intelligence to be politicized in this way.
I wonder if McMaster threatened to resign.
I wonder if he had to, but possibly. It was such an embarrassment for the administration, and it's so precisely the thing that they must have warned about at the beginning, that it just would be such an easy case to make, even to somebody like Donald Trump.
And the other guy was Michael Flynn's little helper,
right? Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So